Hi, this is Cole Horman, and this is my oral assessment for Economics 101 on the national debt and economic growth. For this assessment, my question was, does the increasing national debt lessen economic growth? This question needs to be answered because its results directly impact the lives of American citizens. While an increased GDP doesn't inherently mean that living conditions are higher, countries with higher GDP are generally more prosperous. Because it deals with national debt and the economy in the United States, my question fits within the economics question category. This is because our study of macroeconomic health is directly tied to three core tenets. These are the ability to minimize joblessness, stabilize the price, and increase total spending, also known as full employment, inflation, and economic growth. Because my question directly ties to one of those tenets, it is by definition an economics question. And my answer to this question is yes. Increasing the national debt does lessen economic growth. From a theoretical point of view, the US's increasing debt is a problem because the annual deficit is a problem. The higher our annual deficit becomes, the more susceptible we become to a decrease in both the consumption and investment, along with an increase in the trade deficit. Because our measure of GDP is directly tied to these three elements, that being comprised of consumption, investment, government spending minus taxes, and the trade balance, a decrease in consumption and investment or an increase in the trade deficit would harm our GDP overall, thus showing that the increasing debt causes less economic growth by a decrease in our GDP. Data supports this through a study by George Mason University, which predicts that within the next 30 years, we could potentially see a loss of $4 to $5 trillion in real GDP, or as much as $13,000 per capita. This is supported by a variety of studies, some of which are listed to the right. Notice the threshold category is a threshold of our debt as it relates to GDP, and the threshold being the amount we need to reach in order for growth to be affected. Also, if federal funds accrued from debt are not used productively, it could result in an increase in inflation, which would be detrimental to our economy in the long run. However, there were limitations and assumptions that I made when answering this question. Firstly, we can never be completely sure whether one thing directly causes another. In this example, we can never be completely sure whether an increasing national debt causes lower economic growth, or if lower economic growth potentially causes an increasing national debt. And with the example of Reinhardt and Rogoff's failed thesis, which failed to correlate increasing national debt with economic growth because their data was flawed, we can never be sure if our data is always correct. It can be flawed, and if it is flawed, then my conclusion could be rendered incorrect. In the same vein, if my assumption that my sources are correct comes into question, I would no longer be able to accurately assert my claim. This applies both to my theories and my real-world data. But in this case, I am very confident that I have enough accurate sources to justify my claim as presented on the previous slides. Here are my sources. As I said before, I am confident in them, and they are listed within the slides directly below the information that they are related to. That should be it for my presentation. Hopefully you enjoyed it.